She inspired an award-winning film, a hard-hitting environmentalist portrayed by Julia Roberts, who brought a multinational company to its knees. Now, Erin Brockovich has the Newcastle suburb of Stockton in her sights, just over a week on from its own hexavalent chromium leak from the local Orica plant.
I certainly feel sorry for the community because I think that unnecessarily they have been put in a position of great worry because there's been lack of communication and such a lag time between the company and officials to respond.
Erin Brockovich is Robin Parker's worst nightmare.
Residents knew nothing about the leak until 54 hours after the fact. Since then, they've been told there's little risk to their health, but Ms. Brockovich says they have every right to be sceptical.
So you can surely go out there and find soil samples that are clean, but you can surely go out there and find soil samples where this chromium-6 did land, and in fact, it might not be clean.
The O'Farrell government today announced former Premier's Department Director General Brendan O'Reilly will conduct the independent inquiry into the leak. Ms. Brockovich says it's overdue.
Right now, look at the situation you got going. You got a distrusting community. You got a company who's not being forthwith with information. You have an agency who failed to report it and waited 3 days. And then when they do, they say, oh, everything's fine, this can't possibly hurt you.
Can we expect to see the real Erin Brockovich on our shores anytime soon? Well, according to the woman herself, yes.
I do have plans to come out there in the very near future, and I myself will go down to that community, and eventually we will find out the truth.
Tyson Cottrell, NBN News.
Newcastle's Lord Mayor says he's had enough of political white-anting by some of his councillors. Last night, a censure motion was passed against him relating to the way he declared a perceived pecuniary interest regarding the reclassification of land in Wallsend. He's now sought legal advice and is considering lodging a defamation case.
I want to get on with the job, and I'm being hamstrung, pestered and vilified by some councillors, and I don't think that's appropriate, and I just can't go on letting that happen.
Councillor Bob Cook lodged the censure motion following a complaint. In his submission, Councillor Cook says the Lord Mayor didn't demonstrate an appropriate level of care and diligence when making his declaration, and that this amounted to misbehaviour. The motion against the Lord Mayor comes in the wake of revelations that Councillor Aaron Buman sent another inappropriate email to a community member. This time, Layman Street Fig Tree advocate Jeannie Walls was in the firing line. In it, he calls her a rude lowlife, amongst other crude insults. In defence of his actions, Councillor Buman today said, "I don't believe she was offended, as she's had it for 7 months and had plenty of opportunity to complain." Ms Walls has now lodged a code of conduct breach against him with council. She says there was a reason she waited to take action.
It was when I saw that the other lady had received a similar email, I thought, well, it's important that that people understand it's not a one-off situation.
Merryweather's Annie Smith will lodge another code of conduct breach against Councillor Buman later this week.
It's interesting when you see these paltry code of conducts being directed to me, and something of the nature that Councillor Buman has perpetrated seems to be ignored by the same councillors.
Madeline McKell, NBN News.
We've been subject for a long period of time of ongoing malicious damage and death threats and other types of damage to the house, and it's really disconcerting to not only myself but my family that we have to be targeted for advocating a safer city.
It may not be the best time of year to take a dip in the ocean, but come Monday, lifeguards will be back on the job 7 days a week across Newcastle. But beachgoers might notice something a little different. It's out with the blue flags, which used to sit outside the red and yellow flags, and in with new black and white ones. They signal surfers and beachcraft to stay away from swimmers. And as Cooks Hill gets warmed up for the spring patrol season, the surf club has received a boost. Plans have been approved for a $4 million redevelopment of its ageing base.
Stage 1 will be a new build to the north, and then come back to stage 2 and redevelop, take out what we have here and build new again.
The club, which has 1,700 members, now has to apply for state and federal funding to get the project off the ground.
It's an iconic piece of beach. We're 100 years old, the clubs around us are over 100 years old, so it's a great time to look at how we bring the beach up to the 21st century.
Meanwhile, there may be a shock for swimmers when Lambton Pool reopens on Saturday, with prices increasing over the winter break. A single entry will now set you back $4.80, with the season costing $302. While at Mayfield, which opens late next month, fees have increased by 90 cents for individual entries. Kate Haberfield, NBN News.
He's still on the mend from a knee injury, but Knights second rower Neville Costigan says he'll be fighting fit for Monday's clash against the Broncos.
Yeah, I'm confident. As I said before, it's a bit better this time than last week, and I'm pretty confident. He's not a sore or anything this week, so I'm pretty confident.
It blew up a little bit on the way over in Auckland. It probably handled the travel back better than it handled the travel over, so yeah, we're quietly confident.
If his recovery goes to plan, Costigan will meet a familiar face on the field, Sam Thaiday.
We're both the same age, and we debuted same in 2003. It was a fair while ago, so we've been pretty close mates since then. And he's getting married at the end of the year, and he invited me to his wedding, so we're pretty good mates. Yeah.
But when the whistle blows, there'll be no love lost.
Once you cross that white line, your closest mate's the one who's got the same colour jersey as you, so once you cross that field, nothing matters, you just want to go out and hurt the opposition, and once you cross the field after that, you're back to friends again.
Another pair set to lock horns, Ryan Stigg and Darren Lockyer.
Got a lot of respect for what he can do and how he can lift his team. Obviously, we're not paying him too much respect, and we're not going to give him too much time and space to work in.
Tyson Cottrell, NBN News. A far cry from their usual home on the front line, these Black Hawk helicopters struck an impressive sight at Newcastle today.
And the aim is to train our aircrew in the conduct of a particular type of flying, which is flying in support of our special forces in a domestic counter-terrorist situation.
An intimidating sight for those afraid of heights, and despite their bulky appearance, the aircraft are surprisingly light off the ground. And were a sight to behold in the sky. The view from inside the chopper is enough to take your breath away. The choppers flew within metres of some of the city's tallest buildings, all part of the training for the specialised crew.
The training involves approaches and departures in what we call a complex urban environment, which is a built-up urban environment, really a cityscape environment. And we do that in a number of different locations.
The Black Hawk is one of the most versatile choppers in the Australian Army. It's commonly used in rescue missions and evacuations and was recently used to help out in the Queensland floods. Tyson Cottrell, NBN News.
Energy comes from many sources, but did you know fruit is among them?
Dye from a fruit can absorb light and produce electricity.
Dr. Greg Wilson's blueberry and orange solar cell, just one of many innovations on show during the CSIRO's Visitor Day.
I love people to come inside here, I love to talk to people about my science and I get excited by it.
Oh, I was very interested to see what they're doing with organic solar cells. They're very interesting research.
The CSIRO's solar thermal imaging technology was also open to the public, and it couldn't be more timely. New data shows in some parts of New South Wales the cost of solar power has reached parity with coal-fired electricity.
Fossil fuel prices are continuing to rise, whether it's gas-fired generation or coal-fired generation, and we're seeing renewable costs coming down very, very quickly.
Oh, I've learnt a lot. I didn't know, as I say, that they're so far advanced as they are here.
Scientists say the carbon tax debate has sparked greater interest from the public in their research.
I think there's a lot of demand from the public to understand what solutions there are to addressing and reducing carbon dioxide emissions.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News. Beading, knitting or quilting, whatever takes your fancy, it's at the Craft and Sewing Show in abundance.
I think it's very well set out and they've got a good variety of craft work.
The first of 20,000 people rolled through the doors this morning, young and old.
I think the big thing about craft is people perceive it's something for the older generation.
Very interesting and I enjoy the day very much.
Great. You haven't been for a couple of years and yeah, we're enjoying it.
The big focus this year is education, workshops proving popular.
You can come along and basically come in wanting to learn about a particular craft, and by the time you leave you'll have a pretty good idea how to go about it.
From materials to the finished product, HSC major textile works were also on show, and there's a local flavour, this impressive piece designed by a Callaghan College student.
We do have a lot of students choosing textiles. It's actually one of the growing subjects for the HSC.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
Yeah, pretty happy. It's a shame to leave Newcastle and all my friends up here, but you know, it's a good opportunity to go down there and keep playing footy. Yeah, I'd say so, but that's a fair enough decision. You know, when I got injured at the start of the year, I was, didn't expect to be done any favours, and I was very appreciative of the club standing by me.
It's a sight Jets coach Branko Kalina would rather not have seen today, an injured Ruben Zadkovic.
Picked up a late injury with Ruben Zadkovic, got a knock, touch and go. We'll see whether he makes the trip. If it's no good, we won't risk it.
A corked leg putting him in doubt for tomorrow's clash, but one player who will take to the field, Brazilian Thiago Calvano. It will be the first time the import will pair with fellow defender Nikolai Topper-Stanley.
Nikolai's certainly not 100%, but he needs the game time, so we'll take him and see how long we play him, because it's important that he gets some valuable game time.
Ben Kantarovski is also in need of some match play, but whether Kalina will risk re-aggravating a knee injury isn't yet known.
He's in the same situation. He's another one that's just come back from the World Cup in Colombia for the under-20s, and he needs more game time. But he doesn't. But he needs to be brought back in slowly rather than push him too much.
Kalina admits Friday's clash with Melbourne Heart will be the side's first real test ahead of the A-League season.
They're the kind of opposition you'll be facing week in, week out. They are our opponents in the first round of the new season as well. So you've got to be a little bit careful how you approach the game.
Tyson Cottrell, NBN News.
In these days of high-tech everything, it's nice to see the old-fashioned billy cart can still pull a crowd. In fact, at Glendore Public, it's become something of a school mascot, and the teams that build and drive them, hometown heroes. Students from Years 5 and 6 have returned triumphant from yesterday's Techno Push event at Sydney's Eastern Creek Raceway, having taken out first and second place.
We're pretty happy about that.
The teams, with an even mix of boys and girls, worked for weeks during their lunch hours to perfect the carts.
The children would just tell you it's a lot of fun, and sometimes it's one of those projects where a lot of the learning happens without the children knowing it.
And the cheering just comes naturally.
It began with an apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing.
This is not something we're proud of.
Orica quickly outlined what went wrong. Workers had been trying to restart the ammonia plant on Monday the 8th when hexavalent chromium was released from a chimney. Orica says its priority was to shut down and evacuate the plant. The next day, the company focused on the toxicology of the substance and notified the State Office of Environment and Heritage. But it wasn't until Wednesday and Thursday that residents were told.
Our response to communicating with the community was inadequate. That's something we do want to we clearly need to work on.
Residents vented their anger.
It seems Orica was too worried about its own little environment and not about the people who are your neighbours. To ring 000 and say, we have an emergency.
What they've got to do is put somebody in jail.
I'm not reassured by what I've heard so far.
Orica tried to justify the delay.
This is the first time that we've ever had a liquid release at height, and one of the things that we have to do out of emergency response planning is understand how we interpret the wind data, the weather data on where that could carry.
What are we talking about here? We're talking about we didn't know there was a wind blowing, or we thought we could get away with it.
The company maintains residents' health is not at risk.
If that's the case, why did they say stop eating vegetables, empty your tanks, empty your swimming pools? You know, you can't have it both ways.
Environment Minister Robin Parker was noticeably absent last night. The opposition has been calling on the Premier to stand her down. A spokesperson for the minister today said Ms Parker didn't receive an invitation from Orica to attend the meeting. Newcastle MP Tim Owen was there, but like Ms Parker, he's also been accused of sitting on information.
That's rubbish. No, rubbish. I was advised late on Wednesday night and immediately went first thing Thursday morning to seek a briefing.
The ammonia plant remains shut down until an independent inquiry wraps up. Madeleine McKell, NBN News.
Introduced last year, the balanced rostering system was instantly unpopular with nurses who claimed it removed their right to have a say over their working hours. Many left the profession altogether, putting further pressure on hospitals already struggling with staff shortages. But today, Health Minister Gillian Skinner delivered on an election promise.
Today marks the death of that system and the restoration of nurses' right to have a say in the rostering of their wards.
And it's not a moment too soon for those on the front line.
Having some say about how you manage work and your family are essential, and particularly as nursing, it's a female-dominated industry.
The Nurses Association hopes it hasn't come too late.
I'm hoping that this decision will bring back some of those nurses who actually left.
Another promise still pending is the 12 new nursing positions Ms Skinner said would be allocated to the Hunter.
Letters from the Department of Health are on their way to the local health districts, spelling out the resources and the numbers of nurses to be provided.
Kath Landers, NBN News.
A ray of sunshine for 4Jacks, expanding operations into the old ADI shipbuilding factory in Carrington after scoring an extension to an important defence contract.
Australian Submarine Corporation, or ASC, have seen that we've been doing a reasonable job, and we have the facilities and the people, so we've been fortunate enough to pick up more work.
4Jacks will now construct 40 of these hull blocks at its Tomago and now Carrington bases, which will form 3 air warfare destroyers. The move to Carrington also breathes new life into the discarded factory.
What this will do will really pick up the game for our state, and also it gives 4Jacks in particular in the shipbuilding side of the world a great opportunity to bid for some bigger contracts in the future.
Varley Engineering is also steaming ahead, celebrating 125 years, and the company and its 550 staff have come a long way. Today working on all manner of things, including special ambulances and this trailer which will be used as an education tool to explain the national broadband network.
These days, the technology and what you can do with electronics and computers and what you integrate into our products means that they are far more innovative.
A celebration and open day will be held on Sunday. Kate Haberfield, NBN News.
It's the news every parent dreads, finding out your child has cancer. For Paul Silvestri and his family, that nightmare became a reality earlier this year when their youngest child, Jake, was diagnosed with leukemia.
It was emotionally shattering, yeah.
Jake now spends at least 4 days a fortnight in the John Hunter Children's Hospital as he receives life-saving treatment. For more than 10 years, Paul oversaw the annual kids appeal at the Woolworths store he manages. Now he's able to appreciate where the money goes.
I don't think anybody can ever be aware of how important these funds are until you're actually sitting in the chair.
The appeals raised more than $1.3 million for the John Hunter Children's Hospital since 1997 and thousands more for other hospitals across the country.
What we can do every single year is use really substantial amounts of money to transform boring and inappropriate spaces into child-friendly, child-safe, and that will help the families get through this terrible time.
There's a lot of other ancillary facilities that are provided, like play therapists and all those sorts of things, to keep the kids' minds occupied on something else other than their illness.
This year's appeal begins next week, and we're all being encouraged to help a service we'll hopefully never need.
It's tough economic times if they can dig as deep as they can, because every cent goes to these appeals. So it's 100% goes to the children's hospitals, and you just never know when you're going to need it.
Kath Landers, NBN News.
Last season, the Pickers caught plenty of teams off guard. This year, they face the reality of being favourites. Despite also contributing 6 players to the Newcastle Rebels' successful run in the country championships, Maitland is on the brink of another trophy and a desperately needed week off.
The guys are pretty much busted after that 3 games in succession there, and then Lakes give us a fair run down there last weekend. So, yeah, we just got those niggles, a few slight tears here and there with cartilages and muscles and so on, so we just need a break.
Injuries have forced the defending premiers into some last-minute changes.
Jacob Sinclair, he dislocated his kneecap last weekend, and he being our country player, he's a big loss for us.
In an interesting twist, the Pickers play Macquarie tomorrow, a side coached by Noel Dent, the man who helped Maitland to premiership success in 2010.
I know Noel will have their heads on for the game. I'll speak to him week in, week out, being an old friend, and being an old boys' day out there, they'll certainly be ready for us on the weekend.
If Maitland falls at the final hurdle, the winner of the clash between Souths and West can claim the title, as well as the Sharp Cup. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. Manly finished the Waratah Basketball League season 3 places above Newcastle, but the Hunters aren't daunted by the task at hand.
It's been 1-1 this time. Like, we beat them the first time, then they beat us the second. So it's definitely gettable.
Making the assignment a little tougher, star guard Katie Ray Ebzery will miss the game due to commitments with the Australian university side.
It's just up to the rest of us to step up and play our best and to trust each other and to know that we can do it. And, you know, we've done it before without her, and we can definitely do it again.
To football, and the Women's Premier League Grand Final trophy will be up for grabs when Broadmeadow faces Valentine Phoenix on Sunday. The game sees the league's best attack taking on the best defence.
We did have a bit of a rough patch through the middle, but we seem to have found some form. Our key strikers have been hitting the target lately, and the morale is very high at the moment.
I reckon our girls can handle it. We've done it before with one of our key defenders out on the day, and that's the day that we beat them, so our girls should have confidence going into the game.
And in the NBN State League, Edgeworth will grab the last spot in the finals if it beats minor premiers Broadmeadow. If not, Western can finish 4th with a win over Hamilton. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Another young life lost. Police say the two friends were travelling over this bridge at 8:30 last night when the 18-year-old driver lost control of his Daewoo sedan, which then smashed through a guardrail and fell into the Williams River. The driver was able to free himself from the wreckage, but his 15-year-old female passenger remained trapped inside as the vehicle began to sink. Today, details emerged of the young man's efforts to save his friend.
When he got out of the water himself, he tried to get back into the water and assist. Some people who were nearby tried to jump in as well and help, but the vehicle had sunk too far down. They were unable to find the vehicle again.
It took more than 6 hours for police divers to find the car and the teen's body 8 metres below the murky river's surface. The tragedy has touched even the most seasoned officers.
Hard night for everyone. Yeah, it's nothing that we really want to go to. Absolutely not. So.
Police believe the pair had simply gone out for a drive. They say the road was wet, the air foggy, and early investigations have indicated that speed was more than likely a contributing factor to the crash. The girl's parents are struggling to come to grips with their daughter's death.
Obviously very distraught, and I don't know how they could really cope with something like this.
The car will be mechanically tested and it's not yet known if charges will be laid. Madeline McKell, NBN News. It's strike two for Orica. For the second time in a fortnight, the company is behind a chemical leak.
I've had a gutful of families being distressed by potential threats to their safety and threats to their local environment.
Yesterday, the company discharged 1.2 megalitres of effluent and arsenic into the Hunter River, again breaching the Environmental Protection Agency's licensing limits and frightening nearby residents. Will you be keeping any of the fish that you catch?
Not now, no.
The state government has already announced an independent inquiry into the first incident, which saw Stockton homes exposed to hexavalent chromium. Now Orica is facing more immediate action.
As a result of my concerns, I've asked the Director General of the Premier's Department, the Head of the Office of Environment and Heritage, to meet with Orica immediately about what appears to be some systemic failures.
The company says the breach of licensing limits occurred as part of extensive clean-up activities and that it regrets this further incident. Environment Minister Robin Parker also issued a statement saying those in the Hunter community are entitled to feel safe. And the second incident is another blow and is totally unacceptable. But that's unlikely to appease the opposition, which has renewed its calls for the Premier to stand her down.
Robin Parker is the minister. She should be out providing advice. She should be providing timely advice, and she's missing in action. She's missing because there's questions that everybody wants to ask her and she doesn't want to answer them.
Madeline McKell, NBN News.
With so much riding on the clash between Souths and Wests, both sides made a nervous start, and it wasn't long before tensions boiled over. When the dust settled, the Lions were the first to respond. Fullback Byron Warren started the move from deep inside his own half before Jake Learmouth got involved, setting up Teason Fa'avai Eli. Minutes later, it was time for round two. James Woolford took offence to a high shot from James McClory, and once again the fists were flying. Rosella's captain Jermaine Ale did his best to steady the ship. His flick pass set up Gus Brown. Just as Wests looked to be getting the upper hand, it was time for round three. From the restart, Cleo Meredith stretched out to put the visitors in front. After the break, Souths needed to find a way back, and they were thrown a lifeline by Joe Cudmore. But Wests weren't done yet. A try to the captain tied the scores at 12-all, and a failed conversion attempt left the result hanging in the balance. In the end, a penalty proved the difference as the Rosellas finished the season in second spot.
Residents are still in disbelief that a second chemical contamination came from Orica in as many weeks.
I just can't believe that these things happen all from one firm. It seems like Mickey Mouse is in charge.
On Friday night, the company told the Environmental Protection Authority it had accidentally pumped effluent containing high levels of arsenic into the Hunter River. Ironically, the poison was being used as part of clean-up operations resulting from the hexavalent chromium leak. Residents say events over the past 2 weeks show massive failures in the emergency procedures for Stockton, with many now calling for a public notification system to be implemented. A private member's bill is now being drafted by the Greens to be presented to State Parliament.
It'll make industries that live close to residents tighten up their notification procedures.
According to Orica's website, the company also plans to expand its ammonium nitrate production 75% by 2015.
You've just frightened me to life, to tell you the truth. Every time somebody mentions Orica, I start shaking.
I think the state government really should be re-looking at the proposed expansion of that Orica plant.
Kath Landers, NBN News.
The Magic started the game as favourites thanks to their blistering form at the back end of the season. Inside 10 minutes, prolific goalscorer Stacey Day put Broadmeadow in front. The Phoenix rallied to level the score, but as the second half began, the Magic was still looking dangerous. Midway through the half, the rain arrived just to make conditions even tougher, before Gemma Simon ensured the game was headed for extra time. After scoring the winner in the semi-final, Hayley McBeath caught everyone off guard to grab the winning goal. As time wore on, both sides were feeling the effects of wet weather football, but as the full-time whistle sounded, it was the Phoenix who enjoyed the spoils of victory.
Tough new licensing restrictions imposed several years ago have had the desired effect in reducing violent incidents. But after a police officer was hit in the head during a business inspection of MJ Finnegan's on the weekend, there are now renewed calls for tougher sanctions on businesses breaching RSA responsibilities.
This type of behaviour we just won't tolerate.
We know that a number of people being let in clearly intoxicated.
Police admit standards are slipping and a crackdown isn't far off.
It's part of agreeing a plan that we have to manage all the licensed premises in Newcastle. This Finnegan's at the moment is on the radar, and they know that.
Some are calling for a heavy-handed approach.
For example, ensuring with these problematic pubs that patrons are breath tested before they can come in.
But not everyone agrees that's necessary just yet.
And on the whole, the licensees in Newcastle and members of the Liquor Accord in both Newcastle and Hamilton are very cooperative.
Kath Landers, NBN News. Norma McCarran's mango trees should be bearing fruit in a few months, but she's unlikely to see any as the blossoms blacken and fall off.
I took it to the nursery and I said, is it a disease or something? And they said, we've never seen anything like it.
The same thing happened last year, and after the recent hexavalent chromium leak, she became suspicious.
I thought then at the time that something had gone wrong over the Kooragang, and I said they've definitely dropped something over here.
Samples have been sent to the Environment Office for testing, but in the meantime, Norma and many others worry about their level of contamination in the days prior to being notified. This week, the Greens will introduce a private members' bill into State Parliament in a bid to force companies to notify authorities as soon as a disaster occurs.
Right now, we have the situation in the law that the company notifies authorities as soon as practicable. Now, for Orica, they interpreted as soon as practicable 16 hours after the event.
A question mark also hangs over the company's environmental credentials, with the Greens pushing for these to be examined during the inquiry into the Kooragang debacle.
Clearly, 131 breaches of a licence, being fined $10,500 in the past decade for these breaches isn't good enough.
Orica officials met with the state government today, with more details expected to be released later this week. Kath Landers, NBN News.
If the information says that there's a big problem on campus, and obviously we'll be mainly talking to the university in terms of what we can do about that. If the information says that that a lot of the incidents happen off campus, then we'll be talking to the local council as well as the police.
A touching tribute to young lives lost so long ago. Descendants of Jane and Sophia Langridge only recently discovered the mother and daughter were buried in unmarked graves on the cathedral grounds, and today laid stones in the memorial path in their honour. They are among the 3,300 people laid to rest here between 1817 and 1880.
A lot of them are infants or are babies under the age of 12 months. And we also have a mass grave here as well for the victims of the Koowarra shipwreck, which sank in 1866.
Cathedral Park was the city's first cemetery, although it barely resembles that now. In a $300,000 project, Newcastle Council plans to restore it as a burial ground.
And it tells a really interesting story about Newcastle during the 19th century. It was a city in crisis. It did have a lot of health problems, but at the same time, Newcastle made a massive contribution to the Australian economy.
Using a map of burial plots, 84 surviving headstones will be relocated to their original positions. Other stories of the people buried here will be told through signs and artworks, reviving a lost part of Newcastle's history.
We've got the red flag up on a few. There's only 2 beaches open, being Newcastle and Bar Beach, but all lifeguards are back on duty and Newcastle Council beaches are ready to go.
What are some of the things that you saw last year that you wouldn't like to see this year?
Well, we definitely want to see more proactive sort of parents looking after their kids at the beach and making sure they're swimming between the red and yellow flags.
Nikolai Top-Or-Stanley was one of the Jets' best last season, but Branko Kalina believes a few minor adjustments, including more time on the ball, could see him back in Socceroos gold.
He's so close that sometimes, he probably doesn't realise himself, and it's only little things, and, hopefully he'll get there.
The big defender says consistency will be the key to earning a recall.
It's the biggest honour that you can have playing for your country, and as I said, I've played 3 times now, and hopefully I can get back there sooner rather than later.
Top-Or-Stanley played an hour alongside Thiago in defence during the Jets' win over the Heart on Friday. The pair will get another chance to improve their combination against NBN State League finalists Lake Macquarie on Wednesday.
It's just about getting comfortable with each other's positioning and being able to read each other's game, and so you can feed off each other.
Newcastle created a host of chances against the Melbourne side, with Jeremy Brockie going close. Hunter-bred footballer Jason Hoffman was heavily involved for the Heart, but they couldn't find a way past Ben Kennedy. Marko Jesic was a constant threat, as he has been throughout the pre-season. The young attacker is confident Jason Kalina's return won't see him move to the bench.
Doesn't matter who it is, Jason or Joby or Casey or Ken, doesn't matter who it is, I prefer to have a challenge and try to keep the spot.
Ben Kantarovski will look to cement his own spot at Macquarie Field this week as he continues his return from a knee reconstruction, while North Queensland recruit Chris Payne should be back in full contact training by the weekend. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
The opposition wasted no time attacking the government over the 3-day delay in notifying Stockton residents about their exposure to a potentially dangerous chemical. The Environment Minister tried to hit back, blaming Labor for failing to enforce more stringent company notification laws.
It's a delay which is sanctioned by the laws left by the past Labor government.
She also defended her own response, saying she thought the incident was already under control by the health and environment officers.
All of the advice that was given to me at this time was that everything that
Leader of the Opposition will come to order.
Was being
the Leader of the Opposition.
done.
The Premier also weighed in, announcing an audit of Orica's Kooragang operations.
The audit will assess the operations, the procedures and the practices at the Orica plant to ensure that they're carried out in an environmentally satisfactory manner.
That's in addition to the inquiry being chaired by former head of the Premier's Department, Brendan O'Reilly. His appointment provided a welcome distraction for the government as ousted Premier Christina Keneally moved into attack mode before being removed from the House.
I find it extraordinarily ironic that Barry O'Farrell, the man who said he was elected to restore integrity to the government, when he needs it most, he turns to my right-hand man.
Kath Landers, NBN News.
The verdict is finally in.
It was decided last night that the mosque would be rejected. It's not going to go ahead in its present form.
The $6.8 million plan was first revealed 2 years ago and certainly divided a community.
We're here to protest because I don't like it. I don't want my country to be taken over by Muslims.
But the real battle was fought on planning grounds.
This was going to be a regional development in a small suburban area.
The mosque, in the end, was deemed too big for this block, and the extra traffic just too much.
We would have had 105 cars out on the street, unfortunately, during the mass.
This was about an application that was inappropriate in that location.
A rezoning of the site will ensure a similar proposal can't surface again.
Best news I've ever heard.
Not for everyone.
Well, obviously disappointed, but we're not surprised.
For the Newcastle Muslim Association, the problem remains. Its current prayer hall at Wallsend is too small.
We'll just have to meet with the community and explore our options.
There must be a far more advantageous site for them to go ahead in, somewhere where they're not going to have the pressures of car parking and a lot of residential houses around them.
Nat Wallace, NBN News.
Centre Court is now a centre of controversy. David Jones has taken aim at David McElwain's Gentleman's Outfitters, claiming his shop's annual sale is hampering access to its store. The retail giant took its case to Centre Management, which declared the sale over indefinitely.
It means a huge reduction in turnover, particularly what we've just done in the last 2 weeks was $161,000. We will not be able to replace easily next year and the year after that.
David Jones declined to comment on camera but released a statement saying the store breaches its lease agreement by blocking access to the store. David McElwain believes the company is using that as an excuse to protect its own commercial interests.
It was clearly defined by Westfield Centre Management on yesterday's morning meeting that it was the element of competition that they've been experiencing here, and it got the ire of David Jones, and they've taken a hit in sales.
Today, Westfield released a statement saying the company has a commercial agreement with David Jones in relation to the area, and it's now rectifying that by ensuring the area remains clear.
It is clearly not an access problem.
Shoppers also remain divided.
It does, because when you come around the corner, it's what you see, it's right in your face and you can't see beyond that.
At the end of the day, you can still get 2 DJs, you can see the signage. I don't see there's a real problem.
Kath Landers, NBN News.
The Knights were looking to cement their spot in the top 8, but early on there were plenty of mistakes. In contrast, the Broncos looked composed, although their first try wasn't clear-cut. Junior Sau is awaiting the results of scans on his ankle, but he's only likely to play again if Newcastle makes the finals. The cut on Matt Hilda's head caused plenty of concern.
Probably one of the biggest ones I've seen in footy or car accidents or anything, to be honest. But yeah, no, he's in good spirits. He's not too bad. Obviously, it looks pretty nasty at the moment. But after talking to the doctors, he's going to be rested this week and a chance to play next weekend.
Jared Mullen will shoulder the load if medical staff let him play.
I've had a good chat to him this morning, and he's super keen to play. And obviously, what the scans tell us tomorrow will have some bearing on what Jared does this week.
Last night's loss means the clash with the Rabbitohs at Ausgrid Stadium in 2 weeks will determine whether the Knights make the 8. The final home game is traditionally Old Boys Day, and this morning Matt Gidley, Ashley Gordon, Mark Glanville and Michael Hagan came together to launch a commemorative jersey. Listing the names of every first-grade player in club history, the jerseys are a gift for every fully paid Knights member who signed up before the Hunter Sports Group's takeover. It's hoped they'll become an Old Boys tradition.
The timing's perfect, given we'll have in excess of 150 of our old boys here as well. So it's looking to be quite a big occasion here. The crowd will be great.